The result flashed across the screen. Reform UK victorious, not just winning, crushing a council seat that Labour had held for 47 consecutive years. Just turned bright blue. The swing was massive. 23% in one night, in one ward. Everything changed. This wasn't a close race. This was annihilation. Labour's vote collapsed. Their candidate finished third. Third, behind the Conservatives, behind Reform, the party that's supposed to represent working people just got demolished in a working class heartland. And the footage that just leaked shows Keir Starmer's reaction. He's gone absolutely berserk, screaming at his campaign team, throwing papers, completely losing control because he knows what this means. If Reform can win here, they can win anywhere. The floodgates are opening. Labour's traditional base is abandoning them, and Starmer's desperate attempts to stop the bleeding are failing spectacularly. This isn't just one council seat, this is the beginning of Labour's collapse. The by-election had been triggered by the resignation of a long-time Labour councillor in Ashfield, a Nottinghamshire constituency that epitomised Labour's traditional industrial heartland. The area had been mining country, coal was king for generations, and the National Union of Mine Workers had been politically dominant. Labour had held every council seat in the ward since 1977, winning by comfortable margins, even during the Thatcher years. The seat was considered so safe that Labour often didn't campaign seriously, assuming victory was guaranteed. That complacency was about to cost them everything. Reform UK had been quietly building organisation in areas like Ashfield for months. Nigel Farage understood that Labour's working class base was vulnerable. These voters felt abandoned by a party that seemed more interested in urban progressives and middle class professionals than traditional workers. Issues that mattered to them, immigration, crime, cultural values, economic security, were dismissed or ignored by Labour leadership. Reform saw opportunity in that neglect. They'd been canvassing relentlessly, listening to concerns, promising to fight for communities that felt forgotten. The hard work was about to pay off spectacularly. The campaign itself had been brutal. Labour fielded a candidate who embodied everything voters had come to resent about modern Labour, a young graduate with no connection to the area, parachuted in from London. Speaking in progressive language about issues that didn't resonate locally, the candidate struggled to connect with voters, coming across as condescending and out of touch. When asked a bit about immigration concerns, the response was to lecture voters about diversity benefits rather than acknowledge their lived experiences. When questioned about crime, the answer was about systemic issues rather than concrete solutions. Every interaction reinforced the perception that Labour didn't understand or respect working class communities anymore. Reform's candidate was perfect by contrast, a local businessman who'd grown up in Ashfield, worked in the mines before they closed, built a small manufacturing company employing local people. He spoke the language of the community because he was part of it. His campaign focused relentlessly on local issues, antisocial behaviour that police weren't addressing, the strain on local services from rapid demographic change, the loss of decent working class jobs, the feeling that nobody in power cared about places like Ashfield. The message resonated because it reflected what voters were experiencing and feeling. The Conservative campaign was professional but lacked enthusiasm. They knew they couldn't win. This was Labour territory, and even in Tory landslide years, Conservatives struggled here. Their strategy was to be present, make arguments about governmental competence and hope to finish second. They didn't expect reform to be a factor. Like Labour, they underestimated how much the political ground had shifted. Working class voters weren't choosing between Labour and Conservative anymore. They were looking for something entirely different. Polling in the final week showed a tight race, but nobody trusted the numbers. By-elections were notoriously difficult to poll, and in safe seats, pollsters often got the dynamics wrong. Labour's internal polling showed them ahead by 8 points. They were confident enough that Keir Starmer didn't visit the constituency during the campaign, sending junior ministers instead. That decision would prove to be a catastrophic misjudgment. The Prime Minister's absence sent a message. This seat wasn't important enough for his personal attention. Voters noticed and resented the disrespect. Election day was Thursday. With counting scheduled for that evening, the weather was cold and rainy, typically suppressing turnout. But something unusual was happening. Reports from polling stations showed higher turnout than expected, particularly in working class areas. Reform's ground operation had been effective in getting supporters to vote. Labour's traditional get-out-the-vote machine, which had dominated for decades, seemed less effective. Party activists reported difficulty finding Labour voters. People who'd supported them for years were either refusing to vote or openly saying they'd switched to Reform. The count began at 9 p.m. in the local leisure centre. Party representatives, candidates and media gathered to watch the process. Early indications from the count were shocking. Reform's piles of ballots were much larger than expected. Labour's were smaller. As the counting progressed and numbers became clearer, disbelief spread among Labour activists. This wasn't going to be close. This was going to be a disaster. Frantic calls went to Labour headquarters in London, warning that something unprecedented was happening. The seat they'd held for nearly half a century was slipping away. The final result was announced just before 11 p.m. Reform UK, 2,847 votes, 42%. Conservative, 1,712 votes, 25%. Labour, 1,634 votes, 24%. Others, 592 votes, 9%. Reform had won decisively. Labour had finished third. The swing from Labour to Reform was 23%, one of the largest swings in modern British by-election history. The shock in the hall was total. Labour activists stood in stunned silence. Reform supporters erupted in celebration. Media immediately recognised they were witnessing a historic moment. Nigel Farage, who'd attended the count, gave a triumphant speech. He declared this the beginning of a political realignment that would reshape British politics. He argued that working class voters were abandoning Labour permanently because the party had abandoned them. He promised that Reform would fight for every traditional Labour seat where voters felt betrayed by metropolitan elites. The speech was confident and compelling, broadcast live across news networks. This wasn't just celebrating one council seat, this was announcing Reform as a major political force that could challenge Labour in its heartlands. Labour's defeated candidate gave a brief, painful concession speech. She thanked supporters and tried to be gracious, but the defeat was crushing and her disappointment was evident. She'd lost badly in a seat that should have been unlosable. Her political career was probably finished before it really started. More significantly, her loss represented something much larger. Labour's hold on working class Britain was breaking. In Downing Street, Keir Starmer was watching the results with senior advisors. As the scale of the defeat became clear, his reaction was volcanic. Witnesses described a complete loss of control. He screamed at his political director, demanding to know how this could happen in a seat Labour had held forever. He threw papers across the room. He kicked a chair, sending it crashing into a wall. The controlled, professional persona completely shattered. This wasn't just anger about losing a council seat. This was terror about what it meant for Labour's future and his own political survival. Starmer's fury focused particularly on the campaign team's failures. Why had they fielded such a poor candidate? Why hadn't they recognised Reform was a serious threat? Why had local concerns been dismissed instead of addressed? Why had he been told the seat was safe when clearly it wasn't? The questions came in an incoherent rage, not really seeking answers, but expressing panic. His team had never seen him like this. The mask had slipped completely, revealing someone who understood his political foundation was collapsing. Someone in the room recorded part of the meltdown on their phone. The video was short, just 40 seconds, but it captured Starmer red-faced, screaming, gesturing wildly, completely unhinged. Within hours, that video leaked online. The footage went viral immediately, shared millions of times across social media platforms. Seeing the Prime Minister lose control so completely was shocking. The contrast between his public persona and private reality was devastating. The leaked video became as big a story as the election result itself. The immediate political reaction was explosive. Conservative MPs celebrated Labour's humiliation, with many posting on social media about working-class voters rejecting Starmer's government. They recognised that Reform's victory hurt Labour far more than it hurt them. If reform could pull votes from Labour in traditional industrial areas, it complicated the opposition landscape in ways that benefited Conservatives. The glee was barely concealed. Watching Labour lose what should have been a safe seat was politically delicious for their opponents. Reform UK went into overdrive, capitalising on the victory. Nigel Farage held a press conference Friday morning, declaring that Ashfield was just the beginning. He announced Reform would be targeting every traditional Labour seat where working class voters felt abandoned. He predicted they'd win dozens of council seats in upcoming local elections and could win parliamentary seats at the next general election. The confidence was backed by genuine momentum. The Ashfield result proved Reform could convert support into actual electoral victories, not just poll numbers. Labour tried damage control through official statements, but they rang hollow. The party's chairman claimed one by-election didn't represent broader trends and that Labour remained strong in working-class communities. But nobody believed it. The scale of the defeat was too large to dismiss. The swing was too dramatic to explain away. Labour MPs from similar constituencies began panicking privately, recognising they could face the same fate. If Ashfield could fall, nowhere was truly safe. More significantly, Labour MPs began openly criticising Starmer's leadership and political strategy. Several backbenchers gave interviews arguing the party had lost touch with working class voters by focusing on issues that didn't resonate in traditional Labour areas. They blamed London-centric leadership that didn't understand or respect provincial working class culture. Some explicitly called for a change in direction, if not a change in leadership. The knives were coming out as MPS recognised the Ashfield result threatened their own seats and careers. Trade unions, traditionally Labour's backbone, issued remarkably critical statements. Union leaders who represented workers in industries and areas similar to Ashfield expressed deep concern about the party's disconnect from members. Some warned that unless Labour addressed working class concerns seriously, they'd see more defections to parties like Reform that were at least pretending to listen. The union criticism mattered because these organisations provided crucial funding and organisational capacity for Labour. Losing their enthusiasm and support would cripple the party. Media analysis was uniformly negative for Labour. Even sympathetic commentators acknowledged the Ashfield result was disastrous and potentially indicative of broader problems. The comparison to Labour's 2019 general election collapse in working class areas was inevitable. Ashfield looked like another example of the working class realignment away from Labour. Some analysts argued this was worse than 2019 because it was happening under Labour government, suggesting even being in power couldn't stem the bleeding. The leaked video of Starmer's meltdown became a media phenomenon. Television news played the footage repeatedly, with body language experts and psychologists analysing what it revealed. The consensus was damaging. A leader who reacted to setbacks with rage rather than reflection was temperamentally unsuited for the pressures of higher office. The video humanised Starmer in the worst way, showing him as someone who lost control under pressure rather than someone who maintained composure in difficult circumstances. Labour attempted to dismiss the leaked video as an invasion of privacy and an unfair representation of a private moment. But the defence failed because the video addressed legitimate questions about leadership temperament. How a Prime Minister reacts to bad news matters. If Starmer couldn't handle losing a council seat without melting down, how would he handle genuine national crises? The video raised serious questions about his fitness for office that went beyond normal political point scoring. By the weekend, the political conversation had shifted from the specific Ashfield result to broader questions about Labour's future. Were they experiencing a temporary setback or a fundamental realignment? Could they win back working class voters, or had that base moved permanently to parties like Reform? Was Starmer the right leader to navigate this crisis, or was he part of the problem? These weren't questions Labour wanted to be answering, but the Ashfield earthquake forced them into the open. Polling conducted over the weekend showed devastating numbers for Labour. Their overall support had dropped 3 points nationally, a significant move from a single by-election. More worrying was the breakdown. They were hemorrhaging working class voters, particularly white working class voters in provincial England. These had been Labour's core supporters for generations. Losing them meant losing Labour's identity and electoral foundation. Reform UK's poll numbers surged by 4 points, suggesting Ashfield wasn't an isolated incident but part of a broader movement. Starmer convened emergency strategy meetings at Chequers over the weekend. Senior ministers, advisors and party officials gathered to diagnose the problem and develop responses. The discussions were reportedly tense and fractious, with different factions blaming different factors for the Ashfield disaster. Some argued the problem was messaging. Labour wasn't effectively communicating its working class policies. Others insisted the problem was policy itself. Labour's agenda didn't actually address working class concerns. Still others blamed Reform for spreading divisive rhetoric that Labour shouldn't legitimise by engaging. The internal debates revealed deep ideological divisions within Labour about how to respond to Reform's challenge. Progressive members argued Labour should double down on inclusive, anti-racist messaging and refuse to compromise values to chase voters who'd been seduced by populism. Traditional members countered that working class voters weren't racist for having concerns about immigration and cultural change. And dismissing those concerns as bigotry was precisely why Labour was losing them. The disagreement was fundamental and couldn't be easily resolved. Starmer himself seemed paralysed by conflicting pressures. His instincts were to defend Labour's progressive positions and attack Reform as extremist. But the electoral math showed that approach was failing. Voters were choosing the extremists over Labour because at least Reform acknowledged their concerns existed. Moving toward Reform's positions on issues like immigration meant betraying Labour's progressive wing and contradicting years of Starmer's own rhetoric. But maintaining current positions meant continued losses to Reform. There was no good option. The media pressure intensified as the story developed beyond the immediate result. Journalists descended on Ashfield to interview voters about why they'd switched from Labour to Reform. The answers were remarkably consistent. Feeling abandoned, disrespected, ignored by a party that used to fight for people like them. Many expressed no particular enthusiasm for Reform but felt Labour had left them before they left Labour. The voter interviews were devastating because they suggested deep, possibly irreversible alienation from the party. Opposition parties moved to keep pressure on Labour. The Conservatives tabled a motion in Parliament calling for inquiry into why Labour was losing working class support. The motion was transparently political but effective. It forced Labour MPs to defend their party's record in areas where that record was clearly failing. Reform UK, despite having no parliamentary seats, was getting extensive media coverage as the new insurgent force threatening establishment parties. The attention and momentum were building, not fading.